What if I told you that just a few years ago, the average investor could only dream about owning a piece of SpaceX? But now, the company that's sending humans into space, building a global satellite internet network, and chasing the dream of Mars is one of the hottest names in the investing world. And here's the interesting part. Most investors aren't asking how high SpaceX can go. They're asking something much more emotional. Am I about to miss the next Amazon? Am I watching the next Tesla happen right in front of me? That fear, that feeling of being left behind, is exactly what's driving millions of investors toward SpaceX.
The other side says, this is a bubble. And that's exactly where the debate around SpaceX stands today. Everywhere you look, one name keeps dominating headlines: SpaceX, a company that disrupted the aerospace industry, challenged governments, and turned what once seemed impossible into reality. But investors aren't fascinated by rockets alone. The real game may be happening somewhere else. Starlink, a network of thousands of satellites providing internet access across the globe. Think about that for a second. What could a company be worth if it controls a massive global communications network? What if that same company is also the leader in space launches? And what if it's simultaneously building the technology that could one day make humanity a multi-planet species? Suddenly, valuing SpaceX becomes incredibly difficult. Because you're not just valuing a company, you're valuing a vision. And that's what has Wall Street paying attention. Some investors believe SpaceX is more than a business. They believe it's the next great infrastructure platform. Just as railroads transformed economies in the 1800s, just as the internet transformed the world in the 1990s, and just as smartphones reshaped daily life in the 2000s, many believe space infrastructure could be the next major technological revolution. And if that's true, SpaceX could sit right at the center of it.
But this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because every great opportunity comes with enormous risk. History has shown us something important. Whenever investors start believing a company can't fail, that's often when expectations become dangerous. We've seen it before. The dot-com bubble, the housing boom, countless companies that once looked unstoppable. Investors know that pricing dreams is never easy, and SpaceX may be one of the biggest dreams Wall Street has ever tried to price. Because much of its value isn't based on what exists today, it's based on what could exist tomorrow. Future Starlink growth, expanding satellite networks, new space technologies, potential breakthroughs that haven't happened yet, and even long-term ambitions that sound more like science fiction than business plans. In other words, investors aren't just buying current revenue, they're buying the future. And the future is always uncertain. Yet, despite the uncertainty, investor interest continues to grow. Why? Because one of the most powerful forces in investing isn't logic, it's hope. When people believe a major shift is happening, they want to be part of it. The same thing happened during the rise of the internet.
The same thing happened during the rise of the internet. The same thing happened during the smartphone revolution. And we're seeing similar behavior today with artificial intelligence. SpaceX sits right at the intersection of several powerful narratives: space exploration, advanced technology, global connectivity, artificial intelligence, and perhaps most importantly, Elon Musk, a name that instantly captures attention. Some people see him as one of the greatest innovators of our generation. Others see him as a risk-taker pushing boundaries further than anyone else. But regardless of where you stand, one thing is hard to deny. When Elon Musk enters an industry, things change. And that's one reason investors remain so fascinated by SpaceX. But here's a question that doesn't get asked often enough. If SpaceX is such an incredible company, does that automatically mean the stock will keep going up forever? The answer is no. No stock moves up forever. Markets are driven by expectations. And when expectations become extremely high, even small disappointments can create significant volatility. If growth slows, if new challenges emerge, if future projections don't match reality, investor sentiment can change quickly. That's why experienced investors don't just focus on the story. They focus on the risks as well.
They don't buy dreams blindly. They evaluate whether those dreams can become reality. And that's what makes SpaceX one of the most fascinating investments in the market today. Whether you believe SpaceX will become one of the most valuable companies in history, or whether you think investors are paying too much for future possibilities, one thing is certain. SpaceX has captured the imagination of investors around the world. And in the stock market, the companies that capture imagination often become the most talked about companies on Earth. The question is no longer why SpaceX is attracting attention. The real question is this: will SpaceX become one of the defining success stories of the next decade? Or will history look back and say investors paid too much for a dream? Right now, nobody knows the answer. But one thing is clear. The eyes of Wall Street, Main Street, and millions of investors around the world are looking in the same direction. Up, toward the sky, and toward the company that has convinced the world that the future might be much bigger than anyone imagined: SpaceX.